Hi there, this is Wes Moss bringing to you what does this brand new $2 trillion massive stimulus bill mean for you and for retirees. I mean, this is just an unprecedented amount of money, $2 trillion. We've never seen anything like this, and there is really something in this bill for everyone. But it's 883 pages. It is, even the summary is almost 40 pages of this. So we're going to go through the highlights here and try to emphasize what really matters if you are a retiree or you're thinking about accessing some money from a 401k or an IRA, or you are a small business owner and you're thinking, hey, I need to get a loan, and that loan can be forgiven, which are, again, just extraordinary measures here in extraordinary times of the coronavirus. Of course, the bill is called CARES. It stands for Coronavirus Aid, Relief, Economic Security Act, I believe. Yes, that's what it is. And we are going to go down to some of the top provisions. So first of all, the Americans have $20 trillion, $20 trillion in 401ks and IRAs. So this bill from the Senate, and obviously from the Senate, the House, Congress wants people to be able to tap that if they need to get through this economic period of time. You can call this a nuclear bazooka. That's how big it is to combat against the economic shutdown and carnage that we're going to have for a full month, maybe 2 months, depending on how long this quasi-quarantine life that we're all living as Americans. Obviously, it's terrible for some businesses. So listen, if you're selling personal protective equipment, this is a great time. But for any business that involves having people, obviously restaurants, airlines, it's a totally different story. I think about my local community, whether it's a coffee shop down the road or it's a dry cleaner. How do you get through this period of time? Well, the government wants to give you an incentive to keep people on the payroll. There are also obviously direct checks coming to people here in families in America, and I'm going to go through those provisions right now. Direct money just paid right to your door, and increased unemployment benefits. To, again, I think of this less of a weapon against a bad economy, more of a bridge. Call it a $2 trillion bridge to tomorrow, or a bridge to get us all to a period of time when the economy gets back much more to a normal state. So here goes. First of all, an IRA. So again, Congress wants you to be able to tap your retirement money. If you're under the age of 59 and a half, you can't do that without a penalty until this bill. So the CARES Act basically says you can go ahead and tap an IRA or a 401k and not under the age of 59 and a half and not have to pay the 10% penalty. That's a big deal. In fact, you can even pay those taxes over from that withdrawal over the course of the next 3 years. There's a cap on it. It's $100,000, which is still a lot of money. Again, very much should be enough money for a lot of families to be able to bridge this economic period of time. Now, they say that you have to have a hardship in order to be able to have this penalty waived. Now, from what I'm reading, though, it's very broad definition. So either you have COVID or a spouse, or you need to stay home for childcare or stay home for quarantine. Or if you think about it, the hardship rules here are very broad, and who isn't really impacted by coronavirus at this point. So that is one really helpful provision here, is that they're waiving the 10% penalty to get into your 401k or IRA, pulling money out without having to pay the penalty, and you can spread the taxes over 3 years. That is the first, I think, enormous part of this bill. The second part has to do with 401k loans. So if you don't want to pull money out and have to pay taxes on it, a loan is a little bit different. A loan would be from a 401k, not an IRA, and you can the maximum used to be $50,000. Now it's $100,000. So they've doubled the maximum, and they've extended it to either $100,000 or 100% of that account that you can get a loan on. That's a big deal too. Remember, as you pay back that loan, then you have no taxes on that if you do that over the allotted period of time for the period of time inside your 401k. But also, if you have a loan from a 401k, those loan payments, you don't have to make them now in 2020. So another change to be able to access money without having penalties for that. Now, this is for retirees that are in the required minimum distribution phase of life. Remember, that rule just got changed to age 72. Required, you have to take money out of your out of an IRA or a 401k. if you're not working anymore at the 401k. But again, this is called RMD. It's RMD season as we go towards the end of the year, and retirees scramble to make sure they're taking money out. Now, you're always allowed to take out money from an IRA once you're past the age of 59 and a half, but the government says you have to, required to do a minimum amount at least so they can collect their taxes on it. That's suspended for 2020. RMDs are suspended for 2020. So if you have an IRA and you were expecting to have to take money out, you do not need to do that anymore. That is a huge change in this CARES Act legislation. It also applies to inherited IRAs. So if you have an inherited IRA and you're having to take a required minimum amount for that, you can, and that's for folks that are not necessarily in the 72 range. Those are suspended as well for the year 2020. So again, huge change to the retirement rules, particularly for this year. Now, what about just cash in my pocket? Well, first of all, if you become unemployed during this period of time, there's money in this bill that goes towards the unemployment system to boost your unemployment. So you would get your normal unemployment if you were to be laid off, and then there's an extra $600 on top of that for up to 4 months. So again, a tremendous amount of extra money that Congress is trying to make sure it gets out into the system so we can bridge through this very difficult economy. Now, what about the money that is just direct checks that are coming in your mailbox, or a variety of different ways we don't know the full details on that, but I imagine that the government will just literally mail checks, or maybe to go through the refund process if you're linked up to get a tax refund. But here's the deal on that. And most people have already heard this by now, but $1,200 per person, that's $2,400 for a married couple, and then $500 per child. So think about a married couple with 2 kids. You're talking about $3,400, a massive amount of money that was just going to get sent to individuals. Now that phases out though. So they're going to look back at your 2019 tax form and your 2018 if you haven't fully filed yet for 2019. Remember, that deadline is extended till July 15th. But it starts to phase out. If you're single, it starts to phase out at $75,000. And by the time you're at $99,000, you no longer get that coronavirus relief check. For married couples, the phase out starts at $150,000. By the time you get to $198,000, you get fully phased out. So if you made $200,000 in 2018 and that was on your taxes, then you would not be eligible for this check. Below that, it's a married couple. Below that, you would be eligible for this check. By the way, back to the unemployment boost of the $600 a week, they're expanding eligibility to that to the self-employed. So if you're self-employed, the eligibility for unemployment is increased here. Now, this is also, again, just an unheard of what's happening on this next provision. If you're a small business owner, under 500 employees, which is still can be a pretty big business, you get up to 8 weeks, or the provision here is 2.5 times your monthly payroll. You can get a loan for 2.5 times of your average monthly payroll, up to a total loan of $10 million, which is obviously an enormous amount. And as long as you keep the same payroll over this period of time, and you've obviously got to prove this with your payroll rolls, they're gonna look at where you started with your payroll, call it at the beginning of this year, and then when you get through this period of time, and if you haven't fired anybody, or if you've kept the payroll the same amount, then the loan can be forgiven. So you get a payroll loan. Let's call it you've got 2 months of $10,000 payroll, or 2.5 times that would be $25,000, 250% of payroll. If you keep people employed during that period of time and you can prove it, then that loan can be fully forgiven to you as a business, which is a pretty incredible, again, unheard of piece of legislation for small businesses. Congress clearly wants to just keep people on the payroll working so that we don't have a huge unemployment spike and then have to hire people back. It's much easier, at least their thought with this bill is that just to keep people employed, give employers every incentive possible to keep people on the payroll. The fact that they're willing to lend up to $10 million to a business and then forgive that loan is pretty incredible. They're also the tax credits. This gets a little bit more complicated. But companies under 100 employees can get up to 50% of worth of a tax credit, 50% of wages paid. Now that gets more complicated. You've got to have a reduction in your revenue and be able to prove that. So there are more details that we're going to have to come to you with that. But you have a possibility as well as a business owner of actually having a tax credit as well. Of course, we've already heard of the big money going to corporate America. That's to the tune of $500 billion. $50 billion of that will go directly to the airlines or is positioned to go to the airlines. And then another large, call it 17 billion to air freight or air cargo companies. Again, for employers, payroll taxes delayed. So you can, as a large employer, payroll taxes can be delayed and have half paid by the end of 2021 and the other half by 2022. Obviously, if employers choose to need to do that. And then suspension of federal student loans through September 30th with no accrual of interest. So just everywhere from retirees being able to access money that they've saved in a more tax advantage way and penalty-free way, very important. 401k provisions to increase loan sizes, and all the way to small business owners that can get a loan for their payroll, call it up to 250% of an average monthly payroll, which is just, again, all of this is unheard of stimulus and unprecedented. But guess what? Obviously, we all know we are in absolutely unprecedented times. I'm here in my home office working from home like most people in America at this point. It's a quick recap of, I think, what really matters in this new bill, the CARES Act. I know it's brand new. I think there'll be an entire cottage industry set up around this bill, how to best access, most efficiently access this $2 trillion. I think, so we'll continue to do videos about this very important piece of legislation, really historic piece of legislation that impacts almost everybody in America and our wallets. Hope that is helpful. Please share with your friends, families, comments below with questions so that I can do follow-up videos for this. Again, I'll answer your questions in YouTube. And thank you so much for listening. Stay healthy, my friends, and stay safe.